When the doctor told this young girl that she had a life-threatening illness, her whole world seemed to shatter. The doctor only mentioned that treatment was possible, but the real issue was much bigger. The girl came from a poor family, and her parents had already struggled to fund her education. Now, the treatment would be extremely expensive, and they simply couldn't afford it. The girl had a passion for painting. She thought, why not try making and selling my paintings? Maybe I can earn some money to afford the treatment. But she had no idea what was about to happen to her, something she had never even imagined. Stay tuned until the end. I hope you love it. Before we continue, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. But Sophie refused to give up. If she couldn't afford the treatment, she would find a way. Art had always been her escape, her passion. Now it had become her last hope. She painted for hours, pouring her strength into every canvas. Each brushstroke was a silent prayer that someone, anyone, would stop and buy her work. But days passed, and people walked by, unaware of the battle she was fighting. Some admired the paintings, even complimented them, but admiration wouldn't pay for Chemo. That day, as the afternoon sun beat down, Sophie felt her hope slipping. Then she saw the shadow, and when she looked up, her breath caught in her throat. At first, Sophie barely noticed him, just another passerby, another person who might glance at her work and keep walking. But something about this man was different. He didn't walk past. He stopped. His tall frame cast a shadow over her paintings as he leaned in, studying each piece with quiet intensity. There was no rush, no distraction, just pure focus. Sophie swallowed hard, suddenly realizing who he was. Clint Eastwood. Her fingers gripped the edges of the table as her heart pounded. What was he doing here? Why was he looking at her work? She had seen his movies growing up, heard stories about his legendary career. But standing in front of her, he didn't seem like a Hollywood icon. He seemed like a man truly seeing her art. Slowly, he picked up a painting, a breathtaking sunset over a quiet mountain range. His fingers traced the edges of the canvas. "Did you paint this?" His voice was low, steady, just like in the movies. Sophie nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." For a moment he said nothing, just taking in the colors, the depth, the emotion behind it. Then he glanced up at her. "How much?" Sophie's breath hitched. This was it. She swallowed hard. $100. Clint Eastwood studied the painting for a moment. Then he shook his head. Sophie's heart sank. Sophie's stomach dropped. She had been turned down so many times before, but something about this moment, about him, made it sting a little more. She forced a small, polite smile. "That's okay, sir. Thank you for looking." Clint Eastwood didn't put the painting down. Instead, he did something that made everyone around them stop and watch. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something unexpected. A checkbook. Sophie's breath caught in her throat. The street around them seemed to go silent as he carefully wrote something down. The murmurs of the growing crowd grew louder. People whispered, pointed, nudged each other. Clint tore the check from the book and handed it to her. "That should cover it, kid." His voice was steady, his gaze firm. Sophie's hands shook as she looked down at the check. Her eyes widened, her knees nearly buckled. It wasn't for $100. It wasn't for $1,000. It was for $50,000. The crowd gasped. Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes. Her hands covered her mouth. I don't understand." "Why?" she stammered, barely able to speak. Clint Eastwood gave her a small nod. "Because you're worth it. Get your treatment and keep painting." And just like that he turned and walked away. Sophie stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. The world around her had just changed forever. Sophie stood motionless, clutching the check, tears slipping down her cheeks. The people around her whispered in disbelief, some pulling out their phones, capturing the moment. A woman near the front of the crowd shook her head, smiling. Did that really just happen? Her co-worker at the cafe across the street ran over. Sophie, is that real? She nodded, her voice trembling. It's real. With that single act of kindness, everything changed. Sophie received the chemotherapy she desperately needed, and she kept painting, just as Clint Eastwood had told her to. Months later, fully recovered, she sent him a special painting, a sunrise, a symbol of new beginnings. Along with it, she included a note. You saved my life. Thank you for seeing me, because sometimes the right person walks by at the right time, and in that moment, kindness becomes life-changing.